Nobody in that arena saw it coming, not like this. 1 second, everything was under control. Lights blazing, crowd screaming. Cardi B locked in the middle of a performance that felt untouchable, like she was running the entire room with pure force and energy. And then everything changed. Because the moment she stepped off that stage, something shifted. At first it was subtle, almost invisible, a slight slowdown in her pace, a change in posture, the kind of detail most people would miss unless they were paying very close attention. But those backstage weren't. And according to multiple accounts from inside the venue, that small shift was the first warning sign that something wasn't right. Within seconds, it escalated. Witnesses describe Cardi B suddenly becoming unsteady, her movement less controlled, her energy dropping in a way that didn't match what fans had just seen moments earlier under the lights. Crew members reportedly noticed immediately, calling out to her, asking if she was okay. But before anything could be done, she collapsed. Right there backstage. No buildup, no slow decline, just a sudden drop that instantly flipped the entire atmosphere from celebration to crisis. And the reaction behind the curtain, instant panic. People shouting, chairs moving, radios going off at once. The controlled world of a live performance breaking into chaos in real time. The kind of moment no one rehearses for, even in an industry built on unpredictability. But what made this moment hit even harder wasn't just what happened to Cardi B. It was who rushed in. Offset. Multiple witnesses say the shift in him was immediate the second he saw her on the ground. Gone was any sense of composure or distance. What replaced it was something far more raw: panic, shock, disbelief. Some people inside describe him freezing for a split second, like his brain refused to process what he was seeing. And then he moved. Fast. Sources say he reached her side immediately, pushing through the chaos without hesitation. And what happened next is the part that's sticking with people the most. Because according to those present, Offset didn't just look worried. He broke. Not in a controlled public way, not in a performative way, but in a way that felt unfiltered, human, overwhelming. Witnesses describe him emotional, visibly shaken, struggling to process what was happening in front of him. The kind of reaction that doesn't come from rumors or headlines, it comes from fear. And that fear wasn't random. Because as the story has started to unfold, a different picture is forming in the background. One that suggests this moment didn't come out of nowhere. Insiders are now pointing to signs earlier that night, small details that didn't seem important at the time. A slight drop in energy, moments where Cardi B reportedly looked more drained than usual, comments that were brushed off as exhaustion, stress, or just the normal pressure of performance life. But now, those moments are being re-examined under a very different lens. Because when you connect the dots, a pattern starts to appear. A schedule that may have been too demanding, a pace that may have been too fast, a level of pressure that builds quietly until it doesn't stay quiet anymore. And that's where Offset's role in the story becomes even more significant. People close to the situation claim this wasn't the first time concerns were raised behind the scenes. That Offset had allegedly noticed the strain before, the fatigue, the non-stop workload, the signs that something might eventually give out. And reportedly, he had spoken about it. About slowing down, about rest, about stepping back before things reached a breaking point. But Cardi B, known for her intensity, her drive, her refusal to pause when momentum is high, allegedly kept pushing forward. Because when you're at that level, stopping feels impossible. The machine doesn't slow down just because your body needs it to. And that tension, between caution and continuation, may have been building longer than anyone realized. So when she finally collapsed backstage, it wasn't just a medical emergency. For those closest to her, It felt like the moment a warning turned into reality. Backstage accounts describe the seconds after as pure chaos, people trying to assess her condition, security clearing space, medical staff rushing in, communication breaking into fragments as everyone tried to understand what just happened. And through all of it, Offset remained right there. Some say he barely moved. Others say he kept talking to her, trying to keep her conscious, trying to stay grounded in a situation that was rapidly slipping out of control. But the clearest detail that keeps coming up again and again is this. He looked terrified, not of the moment itself, but of what it meant. Because when someone you love collapses without warning, it doesn't just create panic. It creates realization, the kind that hits later when everything goes quiet. And now If Cardi be reportedly stabilized and fans flooding online with concern, the story has shifted from shock to questions. What caused it? Was it exhaustion, stress, something deeper that hasn't been publicly addressed? Could it have been prevented? And why does it feel like so many signs were there, but overlooked? As the internet replays every angle, every clip, every backstage detail that has leaked so far, one thing is becoming impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a moment on stage. It was the breaking point of something that may have been building for a long time. And now, everyone is waiting for the one thing that hasn't come yet. A clear explanation of what really happened in those backstage seconds that turned a performance into a crisis and a celebration into panic. Everything changed in seconds. One moment she was upright, still in motion, still inside the rhythm of the show, and the next, she was on the ground. And that's when the backstage world collapsed into chaos. Crew members rushed in from every direction. Someone shouted for medical assistance. Another voice cut through the noise, demanding the area be cleared immediately. But for a few critical seconds, nobody moved with certainty, because nobody expected this kind of moment. Not here, not now, not like this. Then Offset saw it. And according to multiple eyewitness accounts, the entire energy of the situation shifted the second he did. Because he didn't hesitate. He didn't step back. He didn't wait for instructions. He broke through the crowd and ran straight toward her. People describe it as instant, like logic disappeared and instinct took over. He was calling her name repeatedly, his voice cutting through the noise in a way that didn't sound controlled or rehearsed. It sounded like panic. Real panic. The kind that doesn't care who is watching. Witnesses say he reached her side and dropped to his knees immediately, trying to get a response, close enough for only a few words to be heard clearly. Cardi, look at me. But there was no immediate response. And that's where things reportedly shifted from concern to alarm. Because in moments like this, silence isn't just silence. It becomes information. And for those in the room, that lack of response triggered an even faster medical reaction. Within seconds, the backstage area transformed into a controlled emergency. But Offset wasn't just watching. He was breaking. People present say they saw him visibly overwhelmed, tears, shaking hands, moments where he looked like he couldn't process what was happening in front of him. And what made it hit harder for those watching? There were no cameras meant for this. No stage lights, no performance energy, no public image. Just a private moment of fear, unfolding in real time. But then, as medics worked on stabilizing her condition, another layer of the story started to surface. And this is where everything begins to feel heavier. Because according to an anonymous crew member, there may have been signs earlier that night. Not dramatic ones, not obvious ones. Small signals. The kind people often ignore because they don't want to interrupt a show. The claim suggests Cardi had reportedly mentioned not feeling fully right before going on stage. Nothing extreme, just fatigue, slight weakness, a feeling of being off. But the show still went forward. And that single detail has now become the center of a growing question online. Why wasn't it paused? Who made the decision to continue? And did anyone underestimate what those early signs actually meant? Because once that question entered the conversation, the narrative shifted completely. It wasn't just about what happened backstage anymore. It became about what happened before she ever stepped into the spotlight. Fans started digging immediately. Old clips resurfaced. Performance footage was replayed frame by frame. People began looking for anything that could have hinted at what was coming. And then a short fan-recorded clip started circulating. At first glance, it looks normal, just another moment in the performance. But when people slowed it down, one detail stood out. A brief pause. A fraction of hesitation in her movement. So small it would have gone unnoticed in real time. But now, in hindsight, it looks different. Like a signal that something wasn't fully right. And once that clip spread, the internet shifted again. Now it wasn't just emotional reaction. It was analysis. Every second of footage became evidence. Every movement became a theory. Then came another rumor. A quieter one, but far more explosive. Multiple unverified sources began claiming there had been tension backstage just before Cardi went on stage. A disagreement, a discussion involving her team, not loud enough for the public, but intense enough to change the atmosphere behind the curtain. Nothing confirmed, but enough to change how people interpret what followed. Because if even part of that is true, then this wasn't a sudden incident. It was a buildup, a sequence of decisions, pressures, and warnings that didn't get fully addressed in time. And that brings everything back to Offset. Because his reaction, raw, uncontrolled, visibly emotional, now looks different in hindsight. Not just fear in the moment, but recognition, as if he had seen signs before anyone else did. As if this moment confirmed something he had already been worried about. And that possibility is what's making this story hit harder than a typical viral clip. Because it turns a backstage emergency into something more complicated. Something layered. Something preventable, or at least questionable. And just when the internet thought it had reached the bottom of the story, another claim surfaced. One suggesting there may have been a final decision made right before she went on stage. A conversation, a debate, a moment where the choice to perform was still being discussed. If true, it raises the most uncomfortable question of all. Was this unavoidable? Or was it the result of pressure overriding caution? Because now the story is no longer just about a collapse. It's about everything that led to it. The signs people saw but didn't act on. The decisions made under pressure. The silence before the fall. And as the footage continues to circulate, one thing is becoming impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a moment that happened. It was a moment that built up. And now the internet is left trying to piece together a timeline that no one fully controls anymore. Only fragments. Only reactions. Only questions that keep multiplying the more the story spreads. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, one truth stands out. This didn't start when she collapsed. It started long before anyone realized something was wrong. The moment that post hit the internet, the entire conversation shifted again. Because now this wasn't just about a performance gone wrong or a sudden medical emergency backstage. It had turned into something far more uncomfortable, something layered, something people couldn't easily dismiss. And according to those rumors, the decision had already been made. She was going on stage. But what makes this situation even more complicated is what surfaced right after. A second clip, not from the collapse, not from the chaos, but from the quiet moments before everything went wrong. It's short, shaky, low quality, almost like it wasn't meant to exist. But it exists. And in that footage, Cardi B is standing backstage surrounded by her team. At first glance, everything looks normal. The usual pre-show tension, the final checks, the last-minute focus. But when you slow it down, people say you start noticing things that don't belong. A slight shift in posture, a hand briefly going to her side, a micro-expression that disappears almost instantly. But on the internet, nothing disappears anymore. Within hours, that tiny moment was being replayed, zoomed in, slowed down, analyzed frame by frame. And suddenly, the narrative started to change. Because what fans thought was just exhaustion now looked like something else entirely. Discomfort, strain, a warning that no one acted on. And once that idea took hold, everything around the situation got reinterpreted. Every clip, every interview, every past moment where she mentioned being tired or overworked. It all started stacking up. Then came the post that pushed everything over the edge. A well-known entertainment account, one with a history of dropping insider hints that sometimes turn out to be accurate, wrote just one line. This wasn't just exhaustion. Y'all will find out what really caused it soon. No explanation, no context, just that. And that was enough. Because the internet doesn't wait for clarity, it fills silence with theories. Within minutes, speculation exploded. Some said it was stress. Others suggested a hidden medical condition. A few even pointed toward external pressure behind the scenes that fans weren't aware of. But the truth is, nobody knew anything for certain. And that uncertainty made everything louder. Old clips resurfaced. Interviews where she joked about being drained suddenly felt serious in hindsight. Performance moments where she paused for a split second were now being called signs. The internet wasn't just watching anymore. It was investigating. But in the middle of all this chaos, one thing kept pulling attention back harder than anything else. Offset's reaction. Because no matter how many theories spread, no matter how many clips got analyzed, people couldn't unsee what happened backstage. The moment she collapsed, he didn't hesitate. He ran. Not calmly, not composed, but urgently pushing through people, ignoring instructions, calling her name over and over like everything else had stopped mattering. And according to those present, his voice didn't sound like a performer or a celebrity. It sounded like panic. Real panic. The kind that doesn't come from confusion. It comes from fear you've already been carrying. When he reached her, witnesses say he dropped beside her immediately, trying to get a response, repeating her name, trying to pull her back into awareness. And when she didn't respond the way he expected, everything escalated emotionally. Because at that point, this wasn't just a fainting incident anymore. It was something more serious, something that made even the medical team move faster. But the detail that really changed how people saw the moment came next. Offset breaking down. Not subtly, not controlled. Fully overwhelmed. Tears, shaking hands. A visible emotional collapse that wasn't meant for cameras, but somehow became one of the most replayed mental images of the entire situation. And that changed the tone completely. Because people started asking a new question. Was this really sudden? Or was this expected by someone who saw the signs early? That's where everything gets heavier. Rumors began circulating that earlier in the night, there were already warning signs. That Cardi had reportedly mentioned not feeling fully right before going on stage. Nothing dramatic, nothing publicly alarming, just small signals that, in hindsight, now feel significant. And then came another layer. A claim that there had been a quiet disagreement backstage before the performance, not confirmed, not officially acknowledged, but repeated enough times across different sources that people started paying attention. A disagreement about whether she should even go on stage at all. If that's true, then the situation stops being a simple health scare. It becomes a decision point. A moment where someone had to choose between pushing forward or stepping back. And allegedly, the show went on. That's the part that changed everything online. Because now the conversation wasn't just about what happened. It was about what could have been prevented. And as theories spread, industry voices started adding pressure to the narrative. Anonymous insiders talking about artist exhaustion, tour demands, physical limits being ignored for the sake of schedules. People who claim this kind of situation is more common than fans realize, but usually doesn't reach the public like this. One comment summed up the growing concern. This is what happens when the body is pushed past its limit while the schedule doesn't stop. Meanwhile, fans were split in two directions. One side defended her, pointing out the reality of overwork, pressure, constant travel, and performance demands that most people never see. The other side questioned the decisions made backstage, asking why someone who might not have been fully well was still on stage at all. And right in the center of all of it remained Offset. Not just as a partner, not just as a public figure, but as someone whose reaction now felt like part of the story itself. Because people aren't just replaying what happened to Cardi B anymore. They're replaying how he reacted to it, trying to understand whether it was pure shock or fear of something he already knew. And that's where the story sits now. Unfinished, unresolved, still expanding. Because every time it feels like the internet has reached a conclusion, another detail surfaces. Another clip, another rumor, another angle that changes the meaning of everything before it. And the biggest question still remains unanswered. Was this a sudden moment no one could stop? Or a situation that had been building in plain sight the entire time? And then came the post that completely shifted the direction of the conversation again. A verified artist, someone known for working on high-pressure global tour, posted a message that didn't name anyone, didn't reference any specific event directly, but still landed like a warning shot across the entire internet. Y'all calling it a moment, I'm calling it a warning. That was it. No explanation, no clarification, no follow-up. But it didn't need one. Because within minutes, the meaning started spreading faster than the post itself. People weren't just reading it anymore. They were interpreting it, attaching it to everything that had already happened. And suddenly, this wasn't just a backstage incident involving Cardi B anymore. It became something bigger. A conversation about pressure, about schedules that don't slow down, about the expectation that artists keep performing even when their bodies might be signaling otherwise. That single angle changed everything. Media outlets picked it up immediately. Headlines started shifting from simple reporting to deeper framing. Concerns grow after Cardi B backstage collapse. Offset's reaction sparks debate over warning signs. Industry voices question whether situation could have been prevented. And just like that, the story stopped being a moment and became a discussion. A debate. A case study unfolding in real time. But through all of it, one thing stood out more than anything else. Silence. No official statement. No detailed explanation. No confirmation of what actually happened. And backstage. Just silence. And the longer that silence stretched, the heavier it became. Because in the absence of answers, people don't wait, they build their own. Theories multiplied. Interpretations deepened. Every clip was revisited with new assumptions attached to it. A pause in performance suddenly looked like a warning sign. A backstage movement became evidence. A facial expression turned into proof. And the internet, as it always does, began reconstructing the entire timeline based on fragments. But then came the moment that pushed everything into a new phase again. Early the next morning, while the conversation was still burning online, a new detail surfaced. Not a headline, not an official update, just a quiet claim from a source allegedly connected to the venue. According to that account, when Cardi B collapsed backstage, the response wasn't slow or uncertain, it was immediate. She was rushed out quickly, with urgency that caught even some staff off guard. Not calm urgency, not routine urgency. The kind that makes people realize something is more serious than they initially believed. And that detail changed the emotional weight of everything that came before it. Because now fans weren't just reacting to a collapse. They were questioning what level of severity triggered that kind of response. But the most talked about moment didn't come from her condition. It came from Offset. Multiple accounts began circulating claiming that he never left her side during the entire aftermath. From the moment she went down, through the chaos backstage, through the medical response, he stayed there. And according to one witness, there was a moment that stood out more than anything else. A quiet sentence, barely audible, but unforgettable. They should have listened. No context, no explanation attached to it, just that line. And the internet grabbed it instantly. Because now it wasn't just about what happened in the moment. It was about what might have been ignored before it. Suddenly, earlier rumors took on a different weight. The whispers about fatigue, the suggestions that she might not have been at full strength, the idea that there had been discussion backstage before she went on. None of it was confirmed, but all of it started connecting in people's minds like pieces of a puzzle. And once that connection formed, one question started dominating every conversation. Was this preventable? But just as that question began to take over, another twist appeared. A cryptic post surfaced from an account previously linked, at least loosely, to industry insiders. The message was short but deliberately vague. This ain't just about last night, more is coming. No names, no details, no timeline. But the timing was enough to set the internet off again. Because now people weren't just analyzing what had already happened. They were waiting for what might come next. And that anticipation made everything feel heavier, more unstable, less resolved. Meanwhile, the silence from Cardi B and Offset remained unchanged. No interviews, no official statements, no clarification, just a complete lack of response. And that silence began to feel like part of the story itself. Because when public figures don't speak during moments like this, people don't assume nothing is happening. They assume everything is happening behind the scenes. And that uncertainty keeps the cycle alive. Theories continued spreading. Old footage resurfaced again. Even small moments from past interviews were reinterpreted through this new lens. A joke about exhaustion now felt like foreshadowing. A tired expression in an old clip now looked intentional. And Offset's reaction, still replaying across platforms, became its own separate mystery. Some saw it as pure emotional overload. Others saw something more unsettling, like someone reacting not just in shock, but in recognition, as if part of him had already feared this outcome. And that's where the story stands now. Not resolved, not confirmed, still expanding with every new rumor, every new interpretation, every new silence that replaces an answer. Because the truth is, the internet isn't just watching what happened anymore. It's watching what hasn't been explained. And until that changes, the questions aren't going anywhere. Was it simply exhaustion? Was it pressure finally reaching its limit? Or is there still something deeper that hasn't surfaced yet? And more importantly, Is this truly over, or just the beginning of something nobody is fully ready to see unfold?